All right, welcome back, everyone. It's week 8 of quarter 3. We are almost 3/4 of the way there. And today we are going to talk about something called factoring. So the next 2 weeks are going to be about factoring. And the first type of factoring that we're going to talk about is factoring using the greatest common factor. And it's a very descriptive way of factoring because what we're going to be looking for is the greatest thing that divides both things evenly. So it has to be the greatest thing. It has to be common between the two or three things that we're talking about. And then it has to be a factor. So greatest common factor. So that's what we're going to be doing. And we're going to start off fairly simple by first looking at just numbers. And then we're going to look at variables. And then we're going to combine the two together in these first 3 examples. So with the numbers, what we're going to look for is the largest number that divides both numbers evenly. And this one is probably going to be fairly quick to figure out because we can write 20 as 4 times 5, and we can write 25 as 5 times 5. And the thing we can notice right away is that we have 5 times 5. So that's our greatest common factor. And the reason that we know it's the greatest common factor is if we look at the other 2 numbers, 4 and 5, 4 and 5 only have the factor 1 in common. And because of that, there is no number larger than 5 that divides 20 and 25 evenly. So the GCF of 20 and 25 is 5. Okay, so this method of stacking them on top of each other like this is something that we're going to do throughout this unit. So you maybe know a different method of doing it, and if you know a different method that works for you, I'm totally fine with you using that as long as it works. All right, so numbers. With numbers, we look for the largest number. Okay, and I'm going to point that out because when we go look now at our variables, when we have just variables that we're dealing with, so we have 3 different variable terms here. And the thing that we're going to do with our variables is we are going to make a stacked list just like we did. So I'm going to start with x to the 8th. And anytime something is to a power of some sort, in this case it's 8, it means we're going to multiply x times itself 8 times. All right, so I'm going to write this down as x times x times x times x. So that's 4, and then I have 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, and then I'm going to do the same thing with x to the 6th right underneath it. And neatness counts here, so try and stack them right on top of each other. So there's 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then I'm going to do the same thing with x to the 5th underneath that. So I have 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so these represent those 3 terms. X to the 8th is on top, x to the 6th is in the middle, and x to the 5th is on the bottom. And the thing that we're going to do is we're just going to say, all right, we've got common ones here, right? And I'm going to stop there. Even though I have 2 common ones in the next column, I can only highlight it if I have common ones in all 3 rows here. Okay, so in this case, I only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 common x's. That means our greatest common factor, our GCF, is x to the 5th because there are 5 common x's. All right, now some of you might know a little simpler way to go about doing this, and some of you might notice something that we have x to the 5th here, and we have x to the 5th here, and it is the smallest exponent. And that is going to be the case that if you have the same variable, the greatest common factor for variables will always be the smallest exponent. Okay, so that's why I kind of highlighted that difference with numbers. With numbers, we're looking for the largest number. With variables, we're looking for the smallest exponent. Okay, but we're going to use this method where we draw stuff out like this and highlight. So, but again, if you know a faster way to do it and it works for you, I'm perfectly fine with you using that method. Okay. All right. Let's go look at one where we combine the two together. Okay. I'm going to try and move this over because it's bugging me. All right. So now we're going to combine things together. So the first thing we need to do is think about 24, 30, and 12 and come up with a number that divides all three of those evenly, because we're going to want to write some multiplication using that number. So the thing that I like to do is look at the smallest number. So the smallest number is 12. And I know I can take 1 times 12 and equal 12. I can take 2 times 6 and it equals 12. I can take 3 times 4 and it equals 12. And that's it. There aren't any additional factors that I can multiply together to equal 12. And so now the thing that I'm going to do is just say, well, let's start at the top. Does 12 go into 24 evenly? Well, the answer is yes. It goes into 24 evenly. But does it go into 30 evenly? And the answer is no. So what I can do is I can say, all right, 12 isn't going to work for my greatest common factor, so I'm going to cross that off. How about 6? Does 6 go into 24 evenly? The answer is yes. Does 6 go into 30 evenly? It's also yes. Okay, so if you can say yes to both other numbers, that means that the greatest common factor is that number. So the greatest common factor is 6, and it's going to divide 24, 30, and 12 evenly. Okay, you don't need to make a list for 24 and 30. You can if you want to, I guess, but I like to do it this way, where I just make a list of factors for the smallest number, and then I decide which one is going to be the largest one that divides the other two numbers evenly. In this case, it's 6. All right, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write 24 as 6 times 4. That wasn't a 6. 6 times 4. I'm going to write 30 as 6 times 5. And then I'm going to write 12 as 6 times 2. Okay, and then next to them, I'm going to expand my x's. So x to the 5th next to the 6 times 4 would be x times x times x times x times x. And then x to the 4th means there's going to be 4 of them in the middle here. And then x to the 3rd means there's going to be 3 of them down here on the bottom. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do a little highlighting. So in this case, I have a 6 in common. And then I have 1, 2, 3 x's in common. All right, so I have a GCF in this case of 6x to the 3rd power, because there's 1, 2, 3 x's in common. Okay, all right, your turn. You get to try these 3 here. They follow the same order that we just did, where we have numbers, then we have variables, and then we have both numbers and variables. So give those a try, and remember, since they're in the red boxes, they have to go into Schoology when you are done. When you're finished, go ahead and restart the video, and we'll go through a couple more examples. All right, here we go. Now we're going to change things up a little bit. So in the first 3 examples, we just had 2 or 3 random terms. We didn't have any sort of symbol in between them. In this case, what we have is we now have an expression. We have, in the first case, we have 10x squared minus 5x plus 30. And we're going to do the exact same thing that we did up above. We're going to factor this thing using that GCF, though. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, let's do this. So when we factor by GCF, what we're going to do is we're going to have the GCF, whoops, we're going to have the GCF on the outside here, and then we're going to have some parentheses, and then we're going to have a minus sign and a plus sign. And what we need to do is we need to figure out what's the GCF, and then what is left on the inside after I factor out that GCF. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that word GCF on the outside, and I'm going to put the green highlight back there. And I'll show you how we can do this. We're going to do it the exact same way that we just did up above. We're going to look at the numbers first, 10, 5, and 30. Now this one's fairly straightforward because if we look at 5, we don't even need to make a list. I suppose we could. We could come over here and say 5 is 1 times 5, right? There's no other factors of 5. And then we can say, well, I know 5 goes into 10, and I know 5 goes into 30, so that means that 5 is part of my GCF. So I'm going to rewrite 10 as 5 times 2. I'm going to rewrite 5 as 5 times 1, and 30 as 5 times 6. Okay, if it helps, I could just put a little indicator over here which one we're talking about. We're talking about 10 here, we're talking about 5 here, and we're talking about the term with 30 here. Okay, you know, we can go even one step further. Let's do this. Let's just say it what it is. 10x squared goes here, and we can even put an equal sign there. And then we have 5x goes here. Notice how I'm kind of ignoring that minus sign? It's because I've already written it in where I'm going to put my answer. I've got that minus sign in the parentheses, so I'm just going to ignore the minus sign for now. And then we have 30, which is just 30. Ooh, all right. So that one's interesting. Because it's 30, we're not going to have any x's with it down below. But with the 10x squared, we have two x's, right? So we have times x times x. And then with the middle one, we have just 1x because there's no exponent other than a 1 there. We just don't put the 1 there, right? And then, so like I said, with the 30, it's just going to be 5 times 6, right? So I'm going to go ahead and highlight and say, that's my GCF, 5. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and put a 5 here. And you might be wondering, well, why didn't you highlight the two x's that are common? Well, in order for me to highlight an x, it has to be in all three terms. And since there are no x's down in the bottom with 30, I can't have an x in my GCF. Okay, and then what I'm going to fill in inside the parentheses now is what's left. So underneath the 10x squared, I'm going to write the 2x squared because there's two x's left. And there's a 2, right? In the middle, you can write the 1 if you want, but you don't have to write the 1, but I'll put it in there just because it's there. So this one's relatively simple because it's just going to be 1x in the middle. And then in the end, we're just going to have the number 6. Okay, so the factored form is exactly what you see right there. And so I'll write it again down here. So it's 5 times 2x squared minus 1x plus 6. Okay, so that's our answer. We just factored that expression by GCF. Okay, so if you follow this method, it should help you stay organized. And if you don't follow this method, it's really easy to lose stuff. Okay, so, but like I said, if you have a method that works for you that you've done before, I'm totally fine with you trying to use that method as long as it works. All right, let's try another one. Okay, here we have 22x squared plus 16x minus 20. Let's do the same thing. Let's just make we're going to highlight this is a space for our GCF. And then we have parentheses. And then we have a plus sign and a minus sign. And then we're going to have 3 terms on the inside, right? Okay. So let's look at the numbers. The smallest number is 16. And we could do the thing where we say, all right, 16, we have 1 times 16, 2 times 8, and 4 times 4. Okay, so those are the factors of 16. And then if we start at the top, 16, well, 16 obviously doesn't go into 20 or 22. 8, no, 8 doesn't go into 22 or 20 either. How about 4? Well, 4 goes into 20 5 times, right? But 4 doesn't go into 22 evenly. So we can say, all right, let's do some crossing off here. So we know that 16, 8, and 4 aren't going to work. That leaves us with just 2 and 1. Well, hopefully it's 2. If it's 1, then we're just kind of like not going to do much of anything. And 2 works, right? And the reason 2 works is because all 3 of those terms are even. And whenever we have even numbers, we know we can divide it by the number 2. All right, so I am going to, let's do this. Let's write these down. 22x squared is our first term, 16x is our second term, and 20 is our third term. You know, and some of you might be saying, hey, you're doing an awful lot of work. I can do this much faster than what you're doing. That's okay. If you are capable of doing that, that's fine, but you just need to be able to show me how you're doing it. So show me some work, okay? All right, so we're going to make this list. So now if 2 is our greatest common factor, I can write this as 2 times 11 for 22. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the x's while I'm here. There's 2 of them, so times x times x. 16 is 2 times 8, and there's just 1x. And then 20 is 2 times 10. And no x's. So just like the first one, there's no x's. So that means there will not be an x in our GCF. So our GCF is just going to be the number 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put that there. And then what's left on the inside? So what's left with the 22x squared? We have 11x squared. What's left with the 16x is we have 8x. And what's left with 20 is just a 10. All right, so our answer, factoring this thing using GCF, is 2 times 11x squared plus 8x minus 10. Okay? All right, you have a couple to try on your own. Same idea. And it looks like, just to give you a hint, looks like both of these will not have x in the GCF. So go ahead and do these 2. And when you are done, restart the video and we'll do some more. All right, here we go, last 2. These, you'll notice, all 3 terms have a number, all 3 terms have x's. So that means we're going to have both a number, hopefully, and x's in our GCF. Okay, so let's get started by looking at the smallest one. So we have the number 18. So we know it's 1 times 18. 2 times 9. I don't know if you've noticed, every time I make one of these lists, I always go in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the left-hand side. That helps me stay organized, and hopefully you're going to do that too, because it really helps to stay organized by doing that. Okay, so we look at 3, and we know, well, 3 times 6, and then 4 doesn't work, 5 doesn't work, but then we get back to 6. Well, it's 6 times 3, so that's the same as 3 times 6. So we don't need to write that one down. We can stop when we start to repeat like that. All right, and then we have to just start at the 18. Well, 18 doesn't go into 24 or 30, so I'm going to cross that one off. 9 doesn't go into 24 or 30, but 6 does go into 24 and 30. All right, so I know I'm going to use the number 6. And so I have my 3. Whoops, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to write our little helpful thing here. So we have this is where GCF is going to go. And then we have a plus sign and a plus sign. Okay, and then we have term here. Whoops, don't want to do that. Let's do this. Term here, here, and here. All right, so we have 18x to the 6th equals, and then we have 24x to the 4th equals, and 30x squared equals. And we're going to write all the numbers as something multiplied by the number 6 down here. And so 18 is going to be, well, we already have it. It's 3 times 6, right? So we know it's, I'll put the 6 first just to make it easier. 6 times 3. And then we have 6 times 4. And then we have 6 times 5. Ooh, these go in order, 3, 4, 5. I didn't do the x's right away. That's okay. You can complete the first one by doing all the x's at once if you want to. So there's 6 of them. Okay, and then for the second one, there's 4 of them. And the third one, there are 2 of them. Okay, so we can see we've got x's with all of them. So we know that our GCF is going to have a 6 in it. And x squared, right? Because we have 2 x's. So our GCF is 6x squared. And then what's left, we have 3 for the first term and 4 x's, so that's 3x to the 4th. For the middle term, we have 4 and we have x squared because there's 2 of them. And then for the last one, we don't have any x's left, we just have a 5, so we just have a 5. All right, so if we factor by GCF, we end up with 6x squared times 3x to the 4th plus 4x squared plus 5. There we go. All right, let's do another one. Oh, these are some of my favorites, and these are some of the ones that seem to be the most tricky for some people. One of the cool things about numbers is any number that ends in 0 can be divided by 10. All right, and so this is one where we should be able to look at it without making the list and say, I think it's going to be 10. All right, so let's just see. Let's get things set up here. So we have GCF out here. We have parentheses. We have 2 minus signs this time. That's different. So we're going to have term here, here, and here. And so the first one, we have 40x to the 9th. Oh, goodness. We're going to have to draw out 9 x's. That's okay. So I'm just going to do this one all at once here. So we have 10 times 4, and we have 9 x's. I'm not going to put the little multiplication signs in between them. It'll save me some time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we have 30x to the 6th. So that's 10 times 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 70. Remember, you can always pause this video if I'm going too fast. 70x to the 3rd is 10 times 7. And then we have 1, 2, 3. All right. One thing that I mentioned early on, and I didn't mention until now again, is if you look at the 4, 3, and 7, there's no number that divides all 3 of those evenly except 1, so that means we know for sure that 10 is the greatest common factor. And since we didn't make a list and check everything, it's a good idea to take a look at those numbers and make sure that there isn't another number that we could take out of there. All right, so we know we're going to have a 10 as part of our GCF, and then we're going to have 1, 2, 3 x's. All right. I'm going to go ahead and fill that all in. So we have 10x to the 3rd. Okay, and then one thing some people like to do is they'll go through and fill in the numbers. So I know I have 4, 3, and 7. And then they look at what's left, right? So in the first one, next to the 4, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So x to the 6th. And the second one, there's 3 of them, so x to the 3rd. And in the third one, there's none, so we're just going to leave it as a 7. All right, so if we factor that thing, we end up with 10x to the 3rd times 4x to the 6th minus 3x to the 3rd minus 7. And we're all good. All right, 2 more for you to do down there at the bottom. When you are done, make sure you enter your answers in Schoology, and if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.